Maxine Adler had spent a decade teaching light to confess. Magazines kept her booked because she could take a naked body and render it undeniable without sinking to cheap tricks. She'd learned to manage the side effects of that power: models who treated her attention like a shortcut, backroom propositions, gratitude that arrived already unzipping its dress. She didn't moralize. She worked, she played, she went home alone knowing everyone got what they came for. I hope you're going to enjoy this story, and if you do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Roomie arrived without an entourage, a portfolio, or the nervous shimmer of someone hoping to be chosen. She stepped into Max's warehouse studio, eyes steady. "Maxine?" she said, offering her hand. "Call me Max," Max replied. Warm palm, no wobble. "Roomie," the woman said, and moved exactly where the assistant pointed. Robe rack, makeup chair, water on the side table. No chatter, no false intimacy. When she untied the robe and walked barefoot onto the paper sweep, Max felt the tiniest shift in the air, as if the room had pulled itself taller. "Simple lines," Max said, adjusting a softbox. "We'll let the shadows do the heavy lifting." Roomie nodded once. "Understood." Max raised the camera and hesitated. Roomie didn't pose. She tuned herself. The first frame was already close to finished. Shoulder turned so light traced the curve of her clavicle, chin lowered until the mouth caught a glint, hip angled so contrast made sculpture of it. Most models tried to sell an idea of themselves. Roomie gave the room a fluent body and listened for where the light wanted to rest. "Freeze," Max said. "Eyes past me." Click. Click. The shutter found a beat and kept it. Max circled, bent, stood, shifted lenses, spoke sparsely. Left hand lower, elbow off rib, weight on the back foot. Roomie adjusted with the economy of a dancer who has nothing to prove. The assistant stopped pretending to tidy gels and just watched, quiet. After 20 minutes, Max's palms were warm around the camera, heat building in a place that had nothing to do with equipment. This wasn't about flirting, it was craft and something under craft. The feeling of standing near a current and realizing it had noticed you. They broke for water. Roomie drank without fuss, robe shrugged across her shoulders. Max said, "You practice." Roomie's mouth ticked. "You can tell? Angles this honest don't happen by accident." "I study the way light erases and reveals," Roomie said. "Then I try not to fight it." Most women fed Max sugar in moments like this. Compliments, questions about who else she'd shot. Roomie just returned to the paper, let the robe slide, and stood with her weight on one foot like a statue deciding whether to step off its plinth. They worked through 3 sets. Stool by the tall window, floor on a black muslin that made her skin glow like milk, a low chaise where Max caught the long plane of Roomie's back and the grip of her thighs as she rolled to prop herself on an elbow. Max kept seeing how Roomie refused the easy version of erotic. Nothing felt coy, nothing begged, it was all precision and breath. When Max finally said, "We have it," the ache in her forearms surprised her. She lowered the camera. Roomie tied the robe, gathered her clothes, and, at the door, offered her hand again. "Thank you," she said. "Send proofs when you're ready." Max watched the elevator swallow her. The studio exhaled. That night she poured wine and imported the files. The thumbnails bloomed like a contact sheet of temptation. She wasn't looking at a body she wanted to take home. Not only that, she was looking at a body that had collaborated with light so cleanly the camera became witness rather than thief. She scrolled until the screen showed Roomie turning her face away, lashes dark against cheekbone, the faintest arch at the corner of her mouth like a secret between the subject and the light. Max had shot stars, athletes, women whose names opened doors in 5 cities. None looked like this on first pass. 2 days later, at a small gallery where Max's latest series hung in rows, she saw Roomie again. No handler, no one to impress. black dress that ran straight from collarbone to ankle, hair loose now, eyes moving from print to print as if she were still on set weighing choices. "You came," Max said, stepping beside her. "I wanted to see how you frame your own work," Roomie replied. "And?" "You strip away alibis," Roomie said. "What's left can't lie." Max's laugh caught on something in her throat. "That's generous." "It isn't," Roomie said, gaze on a print of a swimmer's shoulder rising out of a pool. "It's why I said yes to the job." Max looked at Roomie while Roomie looked at the photograph. She'd learned to smell hunger in rooms like this. It ran like ozone after lightning. But this wasn't hunger for access. Roomie was measuring a craft she wanted to belong to without being diminished by it. The distinction lit something low inside Max and let it burn. By the time she got home, she'd made 3 selections in her head and marked them mentally with grease pencil circles: the full figure against black muslin, the close-up where shadow drew a silk ribbon along the hip, the mid-shot by the window where Roomie's mouth opened on an inhale. Max put her glass down, pulled the drives, and got to work, alone with the light she had trapped, and the knowledge that it had also trapped her. When the storm job came in, a coastal house with a pool like a mirror and windows that didn't blink, Max asked for Roomie. Her assistant raised an eyebrow. "She's green." "She's right," Max said, and didn't explain further. The forecast promised weather. Max welcomed it. The house was a rectangle of glass perched over the Pacific, all edges and nerve. A gull skimmed low. The pool copied it perfectly, then forgot. By 2 o'clock, the horizon had gone iron. The crew worked fast. Cables taped, apple boxes stacked, linen draped like a careless thought. Roomie showed in jeans and a slate t-shirt, hair knotted, face bare. She moved through the prep like someone with a map. "Window first," Max said, "then the pool before the sky gets bossy." Roomie shed denim for the linen throw, then the throw for nothing, and stood at the glass while the ocean darkened. Max raised the camera. The room snapped into the intimacy that happens when a lens starts telling everyone what matters. "Weight on the back foot," she said. "Chin down, breathe through it." Roomie answered with her body. Max barely needed words. Light rolled over skin, chose planes, wrote shadows where a lesser model would have smeared them. The tech fell quiet. Makeup backed out of frame to watch. Max kept orbiting, catching the slope of Roomie's ribs, the flex at the inside of the elbow, the mouth softened by quiet. Thunder shouldered in. The pool turned from mirror to steel. Roomie stepped outside, water sliding to her thighs, hair coming loose. Max swore under her breath and kept shooting while the horizon stacked with cloud-like bruises. "Wrap soon," the tech called. "We're about to lose power." 5 minutes, Max said, and took 10, then 15. When the rain hit, it slammed. They ran equipment onto the patio. Lamps quivered, dimmed, rallied, one by one, with a string of "you too good" and a couple of cautious looks. The crew peeled away for the canyon road. Silence. The house hummed like a sleeping animal. Rain wrote on the glass. Roomie sat on a window seat with a towel around her, water threaded from the end of her braid across the hollow of her throat. Max's pulse took on the storm's rhythm and refused to settle. She poured them wine and handed one over. Roomie's fingers brushed hers. Heat jumped skin to skin, not fireworks, just a clean electrical fact. "You move like light is talking to you," Max said. "It is," Roomie answered, watching the storm. "It says where not to stand." "It also says where to be," Max said. "You heard that part." Roomie's mouth curved. She looked at Max then, not shy, not defensive, prepared, as if she were stepping onto a mark and knew the scene would change. The lamps flicked out. Baseboard emergency lights blinked on, a low golden strip. The house shifted from commercial perfect to private. The rain pressed close. Their reflections rose on the black windows, bodies in outline. "Generator?" Roomie said. "In a minute," Max replied, and crossed the distance because any more waiting would have turned into a lie. Mouth to mouth. Heat. Relief. A rush that emptied the mind. Roomie's hand came to Max's jaw and held her there. Max's palm found Roomie's shoulder and slid down the long, damp line of her side. The towel loosened and fell. Roomie's breath caught against Max's tongue. No posing left, no safe angle. The world right-sized to touch. Roomie's knee at Max's hip, Max's thumb at the hollow where pulse jumped. The intake of breath when Max grazed the soft skin beneath the ear. They reached the low chaise by the window by instinct. Clothes became obstacles and stopped being obstacles. Roomie's body offered answers. Max learned them fast and then slower. The storm drove against the glass, blunt and huge. Inside, the sounds were smaller and more dangerous. Roomie's fingers slid under Max's shirt, nails tracing the slope of her back. When the generator coughed and lights came back, their chests were rising hard, the towel a white flag on the floor, their heat stamped into the cushions. Roomie covered herself without scrambling, breath steadying. The shift in her face wasn't shame, it was resolve. "This can't happen at work again," she said. "I won't be that story." Max nodded, throat tight. "Understood." "I'm not pretending I didn't want it," Roomie added. I do, but the job stays clean." "You have the job," Max said. The words tasted like pledge and concession both. "Send me the proofs," Roomie said, soft enough to take the sting out of boundaries. She dressed, tied her hair, and stood at the door, watching rain pool on the slate steps. "Roomie," Max began. "Not now," Roomie said, gentler than the phrase usually allowed. When she was gone, the house felt bigger, like a stage struck between scenes. Max collected towels and the scattered linen with mechanical care, then sat in the silence and let the warmth ebb from her hands. She had shot thousands of frames, but it was the unshot ones that kept the room bright. Roomie's mouth opening on a sigh, the set of her spine when she took control back, the unafraid way she said, "Send me the proofs," like trust had been earned and would be kept, or everything would stop. The storm blew itself out. Max slept badly, woke early, and culled with ruthless clarity. 3 sequences rose from the heap as if the light itself had lifted them. Window, pool, chaise. She marked them, exported, and wrote a message at noon that said only, "Proofs are ready if you want to see them tonight. Tonight works." 8, Roomie replied. Max read the words twice and started cleaning the studio side of her apartment, then the living side, as if order could keep her hand steady when the door opened. Max's loft pretended to be 2 places. On the left, the studio, white sweep, soft boxes sleeping, a monitor the size of a pantry door, grease pencil notes on tape. On the right, life. Leather couch, low shelves with monographs and stray film canisters, a record player that crackled more than it sang. Roomie stepped in and, by habit, turned toward the studio half. Max brought up the set. Roomie's body filled the screen in monochrome, mouth parted by rain, hip drawn by shadow into a sinuous line, eyelashes wet enough to sun. They stood close without touching. Max toggled between exposures and watched Roomie's attention sharpen as if the images were speaking a language only she and the light knew. "Here," Max said. "Your shoulder was trying too hard." "Agreed," Roomie said, flicking to a frame 5 seconds later. But this one breathed. They moved like collaborators at a draft table. Max forgot to pretend detachment and let admiration through. "You don't act at the camera, you participate." "I don't want to be scenery in someone else's story," Roomie said, eyes on the screen. "I don't shoot scenery," Max said. "I shoot will." Roomie turned to her at that. Not a smile, a decision. The room seemed to tilt toward them. Outside, the city hissed on wet pavement. Inside, the only glow came from the monitor. "The truth?" Max said, pulse tripping. "Your lines are obscene. The shadows don't soften anything. They tell people where to look, and the looking doesn't end." Roomie held the edge of the work table like she needed ground. The smallest shift of breath opened between them. It felt like a yes that had been waiting since the first day. She stepped forward. Max met her halfway. Mouths found heat. The kiss carried none of the storm's panic. This was slow and serious, as if they'd agreed to learn each other rather than prove they could. Max's hands traveled with intent. Spine, waist, the quiet valley beneath Roomie's ribs. Roomie made a sound low in her throat and pressed closer. Clothes slid away with the irritations of buttons and zippers grumbled through, then forgotten. They didn't perform. They worked. Max mapped pressure and pace, learned quickly where Roomie lost balance and leaned harder. Roomie took Max's wrist and guided her lower, eyes open, not hiding, not apologizing for the way her body asked. Max answered until words stopped helping and breath did the rest. Later, the monitor still held a frozen frame of Roomie by the house window, rain stitched across glass like a veil. On the couch, the two of them caught their breath, quiet. Max drew a fingertip along the knob of Roomie's sternum, then flattened her palm there. Roomie covered the hand and kept it. "I want you to understand why I kept distance," Roomie said. "If I flirt, people decide that's why I got booked, or why I landed a cover. They erase the work while congratulating themselves for seeing through me." "I know that erasure," Max said. "From the other side. Every time someone slid a key across my desk, there was a chapter already written in their head." Roomie turned and studied her face like it was an edit. "I wanted you from the first hour," she said, even as heat raced up her neck from saying it. "I didn't come here to parlay desire into favors. I came because the photos matter, and I came because you matter." Max breathed once through the sharpness of that. "Stay," she said, a word that surprised her voice by not breaking. Roomie stayed. They revisited each other briefly on the chaise, then in the kitchen against the counter, then finally in Max's bed where the sheets smelled like detergent and her old habit of working late. They found humor between flashes of need, Roomie laughing when Max's elbow knocked a book to the floor, Max grinning when Roomie hauled her closer like patience had a limit and they'd reached it. The sex turned from proof to conversation. Strength and mercy, pace and pause, praise and request. Roomie learned Max's temper, when to press and when to cradle. Max learned the small, helpless sound Roomie made when everything hit at once, and she learned to listen for it like a cue. Morning light cut the concrete into rectangles. Roomie padded bare to the sink, poured water, and returned with a glass, hip-bumping the mattress in a domestic rhythm that felt earned, not borrowed. Max watched the line of her back and had to look away for a second because the wish to keep this was too sharp. "Come with me to Artem on Friday," Max said, careful. "Galleries, editors, the usual chorus." "That chorus like Scandal," Roomie said. "They can sing," Max replied. "We'll talk about aperture." Roomie weighed it. "Okay," she said at last. "But I'm not walking in as a trophy." "You're not a trophy," Max said. "You're the reason." At Artem, the room turned as one body when they entered. A junior editor tried a smile on, then adjusted it when he clocked the geometry between them. "Roomie loved your," he began, and folded Max into the sentence too quickly. "Max, great to see you." "We just reviewed the proofs from our shoot," Roomie said, tone smooth. "We're happy." "Our." The word landed like a pebble in a pond. Ripples carried to corners where whispers usually like to breed. A creative director in a tomato-red scarf stopped, looked, and said, half joking, half warning, "Bold move, Adler." "Bravery is for climbers," Max said. "I take pictures." Roomie slid her fingers over Max's for a second, a small press at the base of the thumb that said, "I'm here on purpose." They made the rounds, talking about weather and lenses and how to keep a pool from reading green on a cloudy day. People tried to bait tail and failed. Nobody got a scandal, everybody got the message. They left early. The ride home felt like the quiet after applause, earned, a little unreal. Upstairs, Roomie turned, backed Max to the desk, and kissed her like the decision had matured in the room and needed to be sealed. Max answered with a laugh caught and lost, then with both hands, then with nothing but breath and pressure. The city rumbled outside. Inside, the noise sifted down to the two of them in a rhythm that spoke in a language they'd spent weeks learning. After, Roomie fell asleep on her stomach, one arm flung across a pillow, mouth slack in trust. Max sat on the edge of the bed and watched the slow rise and fall of her back. The studio half of the loft glowed faintly from the sleeping monitor. Across its glass, a paused image of Roomie stood by a rain-bright window. Max's old armor still lived in the room. Quick jokes, quick endings, an exit always within reach. None of it fit. Here was a woman who had turned down easy lanes, who had walked into a party at Max's side without shrinking or clinging, who had spoken the word "our" like a fact, and then let the work defend it. Max reached for the lamp, then didn't. The choice had already been made. She slid under the blanket, careful not to wake Roomie, and lay there with the warmth of another body a hand's width away. It wasn't access that surrounded her, not a backroom deal, not a shortcut disguised as a kiss. It was simpler and rarer. Roomie had come for the proofs. She had stayed for Max. In the morning, Max would print 3 images for the wall and send the rest to the magazine. She'd expect calls. She'd ignore the wrong ones. For now, she closed her eyes and let the hum of the city fade. The camera had taught her to elevate what couldn't lie. With Roomie asleep in her bed, Max understood she'd finally stepped into her own frame, not as an opportunity, but as a person chosen on purpose, with the light exactly where it belonged.